Hello everyone, my name is Robert Collins, and today I'm here to talk to you about some of the work David Mandel and I have done on drawing inferences and making decisions based on verbal and numeric probability forecasts. From weather forecasting to medical diagnoses to supply lines, the modern world relies on clear and credible communication between forecasters and decision makers. Decision makers want to know that the forecasters are credible, that they are trustworthy and possess relevant expertise. And in this way, perceived credibility is a forecaster's greatest asset, determining whether their forecasts will be listened to and acted upon. And forecasters have a vested interest in maintaining that credibility. Among the factors affecting credibility, recent research has indicated that the choice of probability formats is consequential. Whether predictions are made using a verbal phrase such as unlikely or a numeric phrase such as 25% chance affects credibility differently. This is problematic since the translation and equivalence of probabilities between verbal and numeric terms is assumed by many organizations such as the IPCC and NATO and beyond. Yet the research shows that these supposedly equivalent forecasts are interpreted quite differently. In one such study by Jenkins and colleagues, participants were told that an impending natural disaster was either unlikely to occur or had a 20% chance of occurring. When participants were told that the prediction was inaccurate and that the natural disaster did in fact occur, they penalized the forecaster who provided a verbal forecast more heavily than did the one who provided a numeric forecast. In one of our own studies, the direct antecedent to the data of the current presentation, participants were presented with an expert forecast regarding a profitable investment opportunity. We manipulated the probability format, verbal or numeric, but also the probabilistic magnitude, low or high, and also whether the forecast was ultimately correct or not. We identified a three-way interaction in this study. In the low probability condition, the verbal forecasts were punished more harshly when incorrect, but praised more readily when correct than the equivalent numeric probabilities. In the high probability condition, there was no effective format whatsoever. We suggest that this pattern of results was driven by the directionality of these various predictions. Directionality is a property of a probabilistic term or phrase that focuses attention on either the occurrence or non-occurrence of an event. Consider the following predictions. If rain was improbable, you might say that rain is unlikely or that it has about a 25% chance to occur. Unlikely focuses attention on the chance that rain will not occur and has negative directionality, whereas 25% chance focuses on the probability that rain will occur and has positive directionality. Conversely, if rain were probable, you might say that rain is likely or that rain has a 75% chance of occurring. In both of these cases, we are focusing on the chance that rain will occur, and they both have positive directionality. Critically, the directionalities differ in the low probability case here, but not in the high probability case, providing a basis for explaining that three-way interaction found in Collins and Mandel. Specifically, we suggest that consumers are sensitive to this directionality. They derive pragmatic inferences from directionality about the expected outcome of the judge and behave accordingly. We dub this the directionality outcome congruence hypothesis, in the sense that the forecasters were rewarded when the directionality of the forecast was congruent with the outcome and penalized when it was not. The directionality outcome congruence hypothesis of credibility relies on at least two assumptions that we have yet to test. Specifically, that directionality triggers an inference of an explicit recommendation, even when none is given, and that influences behavior. To test these assumptions, we repeated our investment scenario, but we decided to solicit their interpretation of the recommendation and whether they would invest or not given the prediction. The directionality outcome congruence hypothesis predicts, of course, that directionality ultimately determines their interpretation of the recommendation and behavior. So in experiment 1, we presented participants with the same investment vignette as Collins and Mandel, except we did not tell them the outcome of the investment. We manipulated both the probability format, verbal versus numeric, as well as the probability magnitude, low and high, as in the previous study, using equivalent probabilities for each. We then solicited consumers' interpretation and decision. So here's the vignette. Imagine that you had some money that you were looking to invest in the stock market in hopes of returning substantial profits. You consult a financial advisor recommended to you by a close friend regarding your investment plan over the next year, and you explain your objectives. Among other information, the advisor draws your attention to a key forecast. Behaviour Corp stock is unlikely, is likely, has about a 25% chance, or has about a 75% chance to increase over the next year. The format and probability manipulations are in the square brackets here. After reading the vignette, we asked participants 3 questions. First, what course of action do you think the advisor is recommending? They rated this from -5 to definitely do not invest to +5 for definitely do invest. Number 2, given the advisor's forecast, would you choose to invest in Behaviour Corp? They could answer yes or no. Number 3, how confident are you in your decision? They could respond from 0, not at all confident, to 10, completely confident. So let's take a look at the results, shall we? Our top 2 panels are the consumer's inferred recommendation, and the bottom 2 panels represent the confidence-weighted decision, created by multiplying the confidence rating by -1 if they decided not to invest, or +1 if they decided to invest. On the left, we have low probabilities, and on the right, we have high probabilities. And finally, numeric point estimates will be in red, and verbal estimates will be in blue. We present mean and 95% confidence intervals, as well as the box and whiskers plot. In the low probability condition, where the directionalities differed, participants interpreted the phrase unlikely as a caution against investing, but interpreted the phrase about a 25% chance as either ambivalent or a slight recommendation to invest. In the high probability condition, where the directionality was consistent between formats, participants interpreted both likely and about a 75% chance similarly as a recommendation to invest. As for the confidence-weighted decisions, they mimicked the interpreted recommendations exactly. Participants were clearly acting upon the inferred recommendation and deciding whether to invest accordingly. These results support the directionality outcome congruence hypothesis. Directionality implied a recommendation, and this influenced behavior. Of course, another possibility remains. A numeric point estimate expresses precision and certainty, whereas a verbal probability phrase, such as unlikely, expresses some level of imprecision and uncertainty in the estimate. The combination of imprecision with a low probability estimate may engender pessimism about the opportunity for a profitable investment. To that end, we repeated the experiment we just did, but we also included numeric range estimates. Critically, these terms have the same directionality as their numeric equivalents, but they express a greater degree of uncertainty, quite like the verbal terms, providing a basis for differentiating these 2 hypotheses. Experiment 2 was identical to experiment 1, except that we added a numeric range format, and we recentered those numeric point estimates to be in the center of those ranges. The vignette and questions were otherwise identical, and the predictions are simple. According to the directionality outcome congruence hypothesis, the range format should be perceived like the numeric point condition, whereas according to the imprecision hypothesis, the range format should be perceived much more like the verbal probability format. With little ado, here are the results. Same setup as before, recommendations on top, decisions on bottom, low probabilities on the left, high probabilities on the right, and now we have the range estimate condition represented in green. The only significant difference between formats was in the low probability condition for both of our DVs. In both cases, the point and range formats differed from the verbal formats, but did not differ from one another, suggesting that the point and range formats, numeric both, were both perceived quite similarly to one another, as predicted by the directionality outcome congruence hypothesis. The results unambiguously support the directionality outcome congruence hypothesis. Consumers assume that forecasters' choice of directionality is intentional and meaningful. In verbal conditions, a forecaster will use unlikely if they want to focus attention on non-occurrence, but perhaps a phrase like a small chance if they want to focus attention on occurrence. Conversely, if they're using numeric probabilities, the framing, whether they're forecasting a chance of rain or a chance of clear skies, will determine the focal event. Critically, consumers assume this implies a recommendation and act accordingly. What is to be done then? Well, to re-emphasize, forecasting relies on transparency and comprehensibility. Forecasters must be mindful of unintended messages they are conveying by their phrasing, and consumers must be mindful of inferring recommendations where none are ever intended. However, to badly paraphrase and belabor a point often made by YouTuber CGP Grey, relying on human behavior to conform to best practices in systems is a losing battle. Rather, we should design systems with human tendencies in mind. To that end, we recommend forecasters and organizations adopt numeric forecasts, expressing the correct degree of certainty in their forecasts, choosing the appropriate framing, and providing explicit recommendations if and only if they are solicited. Thank you.